In 2005, she started digging in the city of David with one goal in mind: King David's palace. Mining activity took place for a long time, and most of the mining operations took place underground. Historians believe that Solomon was a real person who lived in the 10th century BC. King Solomon is an intriguing figure. For 3,000 years, one secret lay hidden beneath the hills of Jerusalem, a secret so closely guarded by time that history itself seemed to forget it. The tomb of King Solomon, the wisest and wealthiest ruler the world has ever known, vanished without a trace. No marker, no monument, no clue to its location. Generations of explorers, knights, and archaeologists searched in vain, dismissing it as legend. But now a rainstorm cracked open the earth near the city of David. And here at the excavation at Givati parking lot in the City of David National Park, revealing tunnels, man-made chambers, and a sealed entrance untouched for millennia. Could this finally be the resting place of a king whose wealth and wisdom defined an era, and if so, what secrets might have been buried with him that could change everything we thought we knew about history in the biblical world? What lies inside doesn't just rewrite history, it terrifies it. Today, we follow the trail beneath Jerusalem into darkness and discovery to uncover the truth about Solomon's final resting place and the secrets the world may not be ready to face. The king who vanished. To understand why this discovery matters, you need to understand who Solomon actually was and why his disappearance from the archaeological record has haunted researchers for over a century. Solomon inherited the throne from his father, King David, sometime around 970 BCE. This famous King David uniting the kingdom of Israel. He was young, possibly still a teenager, stepping into the sandals of a warrior king who had united the tribes of Israel and conquered Jerusalem itself. But Solomon didn't just maintain his father's kingdom, he transformed it into something the ancient world had never seen. The first temple alone took 7 years to construct, a masterwork of cedar imported from Lebanon, gold panels that caught the sun and stone cut so precisely it barely needed mortar. The building became the spiritual center of the Israelite nation, housing the Ark of the Covenant itself. But Solomon's ambitions extended far beyond architecture. His trade networks stretched across the known world. Ships sailed to mysterious lands the Bible calls were in Tarshish, location some scholars place in Africa, others in India or even Spain, returning with ivory, gold, apes, and exotic goods. In the Timna Valley of southern Israel, copper mines that archaeologists have confirmed were operating during Solomon's era churned out wealth that's still being excavated today. Are so happy now to be given a grand tour by Ranger Ron Bernstein, who is the ranger here at Team Nut Park. His reputation for wisdom became the stuff of legend. The story of two women claiming the same baby where Solomon offered to split the child in half to reveal the true mother, turned him into a symbol of justice across the ancient Near East. The Queen of Sheba traveled over 1,000 miles with caravans loaded with spices, gold, and riddles to test his famous intellect. She left, declaring that the report she'd heard hadn't captured even half of his wisdom and wealth. Yet when this extraordinary king died, something inexplicable happened. The Bible mentions his death in a single verse, 1 Kings 11:43, stating simply that he slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. No details, no location, no monument. For a king of Solomon's magnitude, this silence is deafening. His father David has a traditional tomb site that pilgrims have visited for centuries. Later kings have archaeological evidence marking their reigns. But Solomon, the wealthiest, most celebrated king in Israelite history, left no trace of where his body was placed. Some historians suggested the tomb was destroyed during the Babylonian conquest in 586 BCE. Others theorized it was deliberately hidden to protect its treasures from invaders. A few whispered that the tomb contained secrets so dangerous they were never meant to be found. For over 3,000 years, the mystery remained cold. Then someone found a paper trail that everyone else had missed. The discovery that changed everything. Now here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming, because the breakthrough that cracked this. 3,000-year-old mystery didn't come from a dramatic excavation. It didn't come from some adventurer with a shovel and a dream. It came from the most unlikely place imaginable, a dusty archive in Jerusalem, where a woman named Dr. Emily Carter was doing something that sounds almost boring. She was reading tax records. Tax records, ancient Hebrew administrative documents that most archaeologists would glance at and move past. But Dr. Carter wasn't most archaeologists. She was the kind of researcher who noticed things other people missed, the kind who could spend weeks with brittle scrolls and faded ink hunting for patterns that everyone else overlooked and buried in those financial records from Solomon's era. She found something that made her sit up straight. Payments, significant amounts of resources being sent to a location that was deliberately left unnamed. Think about that for a second. Ancient bureaucrats were obsessive. Record keepers, they documented everything, who paid what, where it went, why it was sent. That's how empires functioned. But these particular payments, the destination was blank, not lost to time, not damaged deliberately. Unrecorded. Someone in Solomon's administration was sending substantial resources to a place they didn't want future readers to find. The language around these entries was careful, almost evasive, the kind of bureaucratic caution you use when you're hiding something in plain sight. Dr. Carter started cross-referencing. She pulled every document from the same period she could access. She mapped geographical references. She tracked payment patterns. And slowly, fragment by fragment, a picture emerged. These mystery payments weren't random. They clustered around a specific timeline. The final years of Solomon's reign and the period immediately following his death. And the contextual clues pointed toward the one area, a steep, brutal hillside in Silwan. It's slow, steady, and torturous to watch. The destruction of everything that made this building a home just outside the ancient city of David. Now here's why that matters. The city of David is one of the most excavated archaeological sites on Earth. Researchers have been digging there for over a century. Every major institution has sent teams. The ground has been scanned, surveyed, and studied from every conceivable angle. But this particular hillside in Silwan, almost untouched, the terrain was too dangerous. Sharp limestone that destroyed equipment, unstable soil that threatened cave-ins, and political sensitivities that made permits nearly impossible to obtain. Previous archaeologists had looked at that slope, calculated the risks, and walked away. Dr. Carter didn't walk away. Her team arrived with ground-penetrating radar technology that can see through solid rock and map what lies beneath without breaking a single stone. They set up on that hostile slope and started scanning day after day, week after week. The terrain fought them constantly. Equipment broke. Weather delayed progress. Political tensions created interruptions that cost them precious time. And for weeks, the radar showed nothing remarkable. Just rock soil and the geological chaos you'd expect from a hillside that's been eroding for millennia. The team started to doubt. Maybe the paper trail was a dead end. Maybe the payments went somewhere else entirely. Maybe Dr. Carter had made connections that didn't actually exist. The whispers started. The quiet conversations about when to call it and move on to more promising sites. Then nature intervened in a way nobody predicted. A rainstorm hit Jerusalem, sudden, violent, the kind that turns streets into rivers and exposes things the earth has been hiding. When Dr. Carter's team returned to the site the next morning, the hillside had shifted. Water had carved new channels through the soil, and in one section of the slope, a shallow depression had appeared, a feature that wasn't there before the storm at first glance. It looked like nothing, just another scar in the landscape. But something about it felt wrong. It didn't match the natural geography. It was too regular, too deliberate in shape. They positioned the radar directly over that depression and ran a new scan. What came back made everyone freeze. The readings weren't showing random geological formations. They were showing tunnels, straight lines, right angles, passages that could only be man-made, cutting deep into the hillside with unmistakable intentionality. This wasn't a cave system. This wasn't natural erosion. Someone had carved these passages on purpose and then hidden them so well that 3,000 years of history walked right past without noticing. But here's what really sent chills through the team. The tunnel system wasn't just hidden, it was defended. The scans revealed false entrances designed to mislead intruders, dead-end passages that would trap anyone who took the wrong turn, and structural features that appeared designed to collapse. The entire system, if disturbed incorrectly, this wasn't a tomb dug by people who hoped no one would find it. This was a tomb built by people who expected grave robbers and engineered their failure with terrifying precision. Dr. Carter spent weeks studying fragments of inscriptions found near what appeared to be the main entrance. The symbols didn't announce anything. They didn't proclaim a king's name or promise treasure to those who entered. Instead, they pointed quietly, subtly toward a concealed doorway that had been hidden in plain sight for 30 centuries. Only someone who understood the sequence would recognize it. Everyone else would walk right past, just like generations of researchers had done. Standing on that rain-soaked hillside, equipment beeping with impossible readings, Doctor, Carter understood something that changed everything. The mystery of Solomon's lost tomb wasn't cold because the tomb didn't exist. It was cold because the people who built it were better at hiding things than anyone had given them credit for. Somewhere beneath her feet, past false passages and collapsed triggers and 3 millennia of silence, something waited. Something that was sealed with such care, such engineering precision, that whoever closed it never intended for it to open again. The paper trail had led her here. The technology had revealed what the Earth concealed. Now came the part that would determine whether this discovery rewrote history or destroyed itself in the attempt. They had to get inside. And whoever designed this tomb had spent considerable effort making sure that was nearly impossible, breaking the seal. The stone slab blocking the entrance wasn't just heavy. It was part of an integrated defense system designed to destroy anything behind it if opened incorrectly. The team quickly realized that brute force would trigger collapse mechanisms built into the tunnel walls. This wasn't primitive construction. Whoever sealed this entrance understood engineering principles that wouldn't become common for centuries. Every false passage, every hidden trigger, every deliberately unstable section served a single purpose, ensuring that only someone who understood the system could proceed. Dr. Carter focused on faded Hebrew markings carved near the entrance. A sequence stood out. 7 lines. 7 symbols arranged in a pattern that connected to the first temple's 7-year construction timeline. This wasn't decoration. It was instruction. The carvings indicated a specific order of operations, a mechanical sequence that had to be followed precisely, or the entire structure would seal itself permanently. The team used laser mapping and 3D scanners to document every groove, every angle, every potential trigger mechanism. For 3 days they worked in near silence, adjusting ancient stone components millimeter by millimeter, holding their breath each time rock scraped against rock. The deeper they advanced, the heavier the air became. Dust that hadn't moved in millennia hung suspended in their flashlight beams. The tunnel walls showed no signs of previous entry. No torch marks, no tool scratches from later periods. No evidence that anyone had passed this way since the original sealing. Whatever they were approaching had remained untouched since the day it was closed. Then the breakthrough came. A sharp snap echoed through the passage, followed by a deep rumble that sent dust cascading from the ceiling. The stone slab shifted not smoothly, not quickly, but just enough to reveal a thin gap of absolute darkness beyond. No sound emerged from the opening, no rush of stale air, just cold, patient blackness waiting on the other side of a boundary that hadn't been crossed in 3,000 years. Dr. Carter signaled for everyone to stop. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of the moment pressed down on them. The knowledge that whatever lay beyond that gap had been deliberately hidden by people who never intended it to be found. The seal was broken. History was breathing again. And what emerged from that darkness would challenge everything they thought they understood about the biblical world. The treasure chamber. The flashlight beam caught gold, and time stopped. There was no gradual reveal, no slow recognition of what they were seeing. The moment light penetrated that sealed chamber, 3,000 years of darkness surrendered to a scene that shouldn't have existed outside of Scripture. The team stood shoulder to shoulder, flashlights trembling slightly in their hands, staring at something that transformed legend into physical reality. Golden vessels lined the stone walls, their surfaces etched with ancient Hebrew script, their craftsmanship so precise they caught the light as though polished moments ago. The air carried an impossible scent. Thyme, ancient resins, spices that had been sealed in this darkness since before Rome existed. At the far end of the chamber stood a 7-branched menorah rising from the floor, solid gold, matching every historical description of what once stood in Solomon's temple. This wasn't a replica behind museum glass. This was potentially original, an artifact that generations of scholars believed was lost forever when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem. Every direction revealed another layer of impossible wealth. Fragments of silk, faded but unmistakable, pointed to trade routes reaching India. Delicate ivory carvings suggested exchanges with African kingdoms whose names history has forgotten. Small jewelry boxes, some still latched shut, contained earrings and chains set with emeralds, rubies, and lapis lazuli. One sealed clay jar, when carefully opened, released a puff of aroma, saffron, frankincense, and something citrus. Spices that smelled impossibly fresh after millennia of perfect preservation. The team documented everything with laser scanners, knowing that a single careless movement could damage what the desert had protected for 3,000 years. But not everything made immediate sense. Some artifacts bore symbols that didn't match known Hebrew or Canaanite writing systems. A few pieces showed stylistic elements that seemed anachronistic, either older than Solomon's era or influenced by cultures that shouldn't have had contact with ancient Israel. Could some items belong to later rulers who added their own treasures to a growing hoard? Had this chamber been accessed and resealed at some point in antiquity? The questions multiplied faster than answers. One archaeologist, overwhelmed by the scale of what surrounded them, leaned close to Dr. Carter and whispered, "This makes the British Museum look like a thrift shop." Nobody laughed. The weight was too heavy. This chamber held enough material to rewrite understanding of Bronze Age trade. Authorities say this deep rediscovery dates back an estimated 3,300 years to the Bronze Age, Israelite wealth, and ancient craftsmanship. But even as the team cataloged treasures that would occupy scholars for decades, everyone sensed the same thing. This wasn't the final chamber. This was a vestibule. Whatever lay deeper had been buried for a reason, and the clues carved into the walls suggested they were only beginning to understand why. The symbols and the firestorm. The gold was breathtaking, but it was the writing on the walls that stopped everything. As torchlight swept across the stone, a cluster of carvings emerged that didn't belong to any known category of ancient Israelite art. These weren't simple decorations or religious symbols. They seemed alive with meaning. Geometric patterns so precise they resembled architectural blueprints. Mathematical ratios that shouldn't have existed in the 10th century BCE. And at the center of it all, a sharp star-shaped seal carved with absolute precision. That seal matched ancient descriptions of Solomon's personal mark. Not merely a royal symbol, but according to persistent legend, a powerful sigil associated with commanding supernatural forces. Medieval texts called it the Seal of Solomon and attributed to it the ability to bind spirits. Whether those legends held any truth, the physical seal carved into this wall was undeniably real, undeniably ancient, and undeniably connected to the king, whose name echoed through every religious tradition that traced its roots to Jerusalem. The mathematical patterns surrounding the seal drew particular attention. One archaeologist studied them for hours before announcing, "This is advanced geometry ratios and structural calculations that we associate with much later periods. Either our timeline is wrong, or Solomon had access to knowledge we don't fully understand." Stacked in a corner of the chamber sat clay tablets covered in dense Hebrew script. Some worn by time, others so sharply engraved they appeared almost fresh. One tablet detailed temple dimensions that matched the Book of 1 Kings, nearly word for word, providing physical confirmation of biblical accounts that scholars had long debated. But another tablet stood apart. Its language bent in unfamiliar directions, its structure broke known grammatical rules. It read less like historical record and more like encoded instruction, referencing something called the key connected to hidden knowledge. Dr. Carter recognized the possible reference immediately. Medieval manuscripts spoke of something called the Key of Solomon, a legendary text supposedly containing rituals, codes, and forbidden wisdom. Mainstream scholarship had always dismissed it as later fantasy. But here, in a sealed chamber dating to Solomon's actual reign, the same terminology appeared carved in stone. Then someone noticed the chest. Tucked into a shadowy alcove nearly invisible, unless you knew where to look, sat a container roughly the size of a modern carry-on bag. Dense, heavy, sealed with metal latches and carved with the same star symbol that dominated the chamber walls. There were no hinges, no visible locks, no obvious mechanism for opening it. The team gathered around without touching it. Whatever this container held, the people who sealed this tomb had placed it here with intention. Some speculated it might contain scrolls, perhaps the original wisdom texts attributed to Solomon. Others wondered if it connected somehow to the Ark of the Covenant, whose location has remained history's greatest mystery. But the discovery that truly ignited global controversy wasn't the chest or the symbols. It was 5 lines of ancient Hebrew carved along the tomb's eastern wall, so worn they almost escaped notice. When translated, they read, "May wisdom guide my hand, as stars guide sailors." The poetic structure matched the style of Proverbs. The language fit Solomon's era precisely. If authentic, this was the first physical first-hand trace of Solomon's own voice, a personal inscription from a king who had become more myth than man. The academic world erupted. Some scholars declared it the smoking gun, proving Solomon's historical existence. Others attacked immediately, arguing the inscription seemed too polished, too perfect. Possibly a later imitation designed to look ancient. Debates exploded across universities' journals and social media. Headlines ranged from Solomon found to holy hoax. Dr. Carter remained measured. "We didn't set out to find a king, but the evidence keeps accumulating. If that's not worth investigating, nothing is." Beneath the stones of Jerusalem, a secret has slept for 3,000 years. Treasures, inscriptions, and knowledge deliberately hidden from the world. The sealed chamber remains untouched, its mysteries intact, daring us to uncover what was protected so fiercely by those who came before. If this truly is Solomon's tomb, what truths lie within? And what might they reveal about the wisdom, wealth, and power of a king whose legacy shaped civilizations? Could the contents of that chest rewrite what we know about history, faith, and human ingenuity? Or is some knowledge meant to remain buried? And if ancient people went to such extraordinary lengths to hide it, should we honor that secrecy or risk everything to bring it to light? The story isn't over. Every stone, every artifact, every inscription is a reminder that history still holds secrets capable of challenging everything we thought we knew. And the question that lingers above all else is this: are we ready for what Solomon's tomb might finally reveal?